Barcelona fans have seen some of the best players in football wear their jersey. But there is one name that still gets a completely different reaction: Luis Figo. For years, he was one of Barcelona's biggest stars. He won trophies, became one of the main players in the team, and was loved by the supporters. Then, in the summer of 2000, Real Madrid presidential candidate Florentino Pérez made a claim that sounded almost impossible.
Si yo soy presidente del Real Madrid, Luis Figo, jugador del Real Madrid.
He said that if he became president, Figo would join Real Madrid. At the time, Figo was still a Barcelona player. He was one of their biggest stars. And publicly, he was saying that he wanted to stay. Then, only days later, he was standing beside Pérez holding a Real Madrid shirt. That is why this was never treated like a normal transfer. There was a contract problem, there was a presidential election, there was a private agreement involving a huge amount of money, and there were two completely different stories being told in public and behind closed doors. So the real question is not simply why Barcelona fans hated Figo, it is this: did Figo plan the move from the beginning, or did a contract gamble become something much bigger than he expected? Before we get into it, hit the like button to support the channel, subscribe if you are new here, and let's get to the story. Figo joined Barcelona in 1995, and he did not take long to become one of their main players. He was quick, technically excellent, and capable of creating chances from wide areas. More importantly, he became one of the players Barcelona relied on. During his 5 seasons at the club, he helped them win league titles, Copa del Rey trophies, and the Cup Winners' Cup. He was not waiting for a bigger club to come along. He was already playing for one of the biggest clubs in Europe, and Barcelona fans had every reason to believe he would remain part of their future. That is what made his situation so different from a normal transfer story. This was not a player who had lost his place. It was not a player the club wanted to sell. Figo was one of the faces of Barcelona, but behind the scenes, his relationship with the club was beginning to change. By 2000, Figo believed his contract no longer matched his importance to the team. He wanted Barcelona to improve his deal.
I communicate that to Núñez, for the president. I said, look, is a person, a candidate, is elections, they want to pay my clause. But I think in that moment, it was my feeling, I don't know if it's right or not, Barcelona was passing a difficult financial situation.
According to Figo's later version of events, he spoke to club president Josep Luis Núñez about it, but did not get the response he wanted. From Barcelona's point of view, this may have looked like a normal contract discussion. A top player wants more money. His agent applies pressure, the club negotiates. That happens all the time. But Figo's representatives now had another way to push Barcelona. Real Madrid were interested, and that gave them much more power in the negotiation. The problem was that this was Real Madrid. Using interest from another club to improve your contract is one thing. Allowing talks with Barcelona's biggest rival to go too far is something completely different. And while Figo was trying to improve his position at Barcelona, Florentino Pérez saw a chance to use the situation for his own purpose. Florentino Pérez wanted to become Real Madrid president. But beating Lorenzo Sanz was not going to be easy. Real Madrid had just won the Champions League, so Pérez needed a promise that could completely change the election. He chose Luis Figo. Pérez publicly told Real Madrid members that Figo would join the club if he became president. Then he went even further. He reportedly promised that if he failed to sign Figo, he would cover the membership fees of Real Madrid's members for the season. That was a huge risk. Pérez had tied his campaign to one player, not a player from another league, not someone whose contract was about to expire, Barcelona's biggest star. And on July 16, 2000, Pérez defeated Lorenzo Sanz. From that moment, the story moved away from public promises and into something much more serious, because Figo's representatives had already signed an agreement. Before the election, Figo's agent Jose Vega had been dealing with Pérez's side, and an agreement was reportedly signed. The most important part was the penalty. If Pérez became president and Figo then refused to join Real Madrid, Figo's side could reportedly be forced to pay around 30 million euros. That changes the way you look at the entire transfer. Because now there was a huge difference between saying, we are using Madrid's interest to put pressure on Barcelona, and actually signing something that could cost millions if the move did not happen. This is also where nobody can say with complete certainty what Figo expected. Maybe he genuinely wanted Madrid. Maybe his side thought Pérez would never win. Maybe they believed Barcelona would offer him a new contract before anything became serious. But whatever the original plan was, the agreement now mattered, and Barcelona supporters knew almost nothing about it. Publicly, they were still hearing something completely different. While Pérez was promising Figo to Real Madrid members, Figo was giving Barcelona supporters another message. He said he wanted to stay. He tried to calm the rumours, and only days before the transfer, he was still denying that he was about to join Real Madrid. This is the part that caused the biggest damage with Barcelona fans. Not because players never leave, they do, but supporters felt they were being told one thing while something completely different was happening behind the scenes. If Figo had openly said he was considering Real Madrid, the reaction would still have been angry. But at least Barcelona fans would have known where things stood. Instead, the change happened incredibly quickly. One moment, he was publicly talking about staying. Soon after, he was wearing Real Madrid colours, and from the outside, it looked like Barcelona had been completely blindsided. That is when Figo stopped being seen as a departing star. He became a traitor in the eyes of many Barcelona supporters. Now the move itself was complete. The next question was whether it actually worked for Figo. From a football point of view, Figo's move to Real Madrid was a success. He became one of the first major names of the era that later became known for the Galacticos. Madrid were building a team full of global stars, and Figo was one of the players at the centre of it. He won La Liga, he won the Champions League, and he won the Ballon d'Or. So if you only judge the move by trophies and individual success, Figo made a very good career decision. This is important because it separates two completely different questions. Was joining Real Madrid good for his career? Yes. Was it ever going to be accepted by Barcelona supporters? No. Those two things can both be true. And the first time he returned to Camp Nou showed just how far apart those two worlds had become. A few months after the transfer, Real Madrid travelled to Camp Nou. This was Figo's first match back at Barcelona, wearing white. The reaction started immediately. Every touch was booed. The noise increased whenever he went near the ball. Banners were aimed at him. Abuse came from the stands. Barcelona won the match 2-0, but much of the attention stayed on Figo. What made that night different was not simply that a former player had been booed. That happens all the time. This felt personal. Barcelona supporters were not reacting to his performance. They were reacting to what he represented. For them, Figo had become the symbol of a transfer they still could not accept. But even that first return was not the moment that came to define the whole story. That happened 2 years later. In November 2002, Real Madrid returned to Camp Nou again. By then, more than 2 years had passed since Figo left. During the match, every time he went over to take a corner, objects were thrown from the stands. Bottles, coins, and eventually the image that became famous around the world, a pig's head near the corner flag. The match had to be stopped for several minutes because so many objects were being thrown onto the pitch. That image became tied to Figo's transfer forever. It showed that this was no longer simply about football. 2 years had passed. Figo had moved on with his career. Real Madrid had moved on. Barcelona had signed other players. But the anger around his name was still there. And that is why this transfer is remembered differently from almost every other major move between rival clubs. More than 2 decades later, people still argue about Luis Figo. Some Barcelona fans will always call him a traitor. Others look at the contract dispute and believe Barcelona played a part in pushing him away. And then there is Florentino Pérez, who saw an opportunity and turned it into one of the biggest transfers football had ever seen. But I think the reason this story has lasted for so long is actually much simpler. Figo did not just leave Barcelona. He went directly to Real Madrid at the exact time Barcelona supporters believed he was staying. That is what people remembered. And no number of trophies at Madrid was ever going to change how Barcelona fans saw that moment. So what do you guys think? Was Luis Figo really a traitor? Or did a contract dispute get completely out of control? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe for more football stories like this. That's all for today. I'll see you in the next one.